On this week's episode of Comics Controllers, we talk about the Spider-Man Multiverse event, with Spider-Man coming from everywhere. We also discuss the new BioShock Infinite DLC, and how the final one brings the whole universe together in a nice, tight little package so you can get the whole story. All that and more on this, episode 16. Welcome to the Multiverse. I'm Kyle, joined by my co-host Steven.
How's it going?
It's going pretty good, Steven. So what's on the plate for this week?
We actually got a question in. Question from Ulysses, and I say it's a question. More of a, hey guys, what do you think about this? Accompanied by a link. But following this link, I see it takes us to the new Spider-Man event starting in, I think it's around October, November.
What's that event?
It's the Spider-Verse event. And I know you're thinking, Steven, what is the Spider-Verse event? I'm going to tell you. It's kind of actually, it's not hard to picture from that term, but...
Well, actually, can I guess what it is?
Sure, yeah.
Is a Spider-Verse event like a slam poetry contest between all the Spider-Man characters, where they have to get up there and say, like, spider poetry?
No, I'd actually be totally for that.
That would be very interesting. I'd like to see, and it's like each character is written by a different author. So like you could have like Grant Morrison does one Spider-Man character, and then somebody else does like Aunt May, and then like
here's my question though: when you get to the doppelganger Spider-Man, what is his poem about?
Ooh, are you
chasing flies? I don't know.
Yeah, isn't the doppelganger the one that's got like No, is he the one who's no? That's Man Spider. I don't remember. There's so many. All right.
I think we're talking about the same character. I just may have the names confused. I'm talking about the giant, spider thing. Yeah, where he has all the extra arms and mandibles and everything. Yeah, it'd be a lot of screeching. But you're right in the sense that it involves a lot of characters. Unfortunately, it has absolutely nothing to do with slam poetry, which I think is a shame, and they should reconsider.
They should.
However, what it does involve is a multi-dimensional event which will bring every Spider-Man in existence ever together in one story.
Wow.
Yeah.
There are a lot of Spider-Men out there.
There are a lot of Spider-Men out there, and I just want to say that I've read Spider-Man a lot, and there were some that I didn't even expect, like the Spider-Man from 1602 is there. Spider-Ham, which was the pig. Yeah, it's from...
I remember Spider-Ham.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, my God.
My favorite Spider-Man of all time, Ben Reilly, is there. But they also have some of the newer ones, like Miles Morales, Spider-Woman. Several of the Spider-Girls will actually be there. So this is kind of a... It's interesting.
Miles Morales is the Ultimate Spider-Man?
He is the Ultimate Spider-Man, and he's a pretty cool character. If you've never read anything with it, I've really enjoyed the little bit I've read that they've done with him. But so the plot basically is that there's this villain who was created by J. Michael Straczynski named Moreland. And Moreland is a guy who deals a lot with animals. Somehow he can
like
conquer
totem spirits and stuff,
yes,
right?
Yes. So he can basically, if he can conquer these totem spirits, he can get their powers or something similar. I have to admit, I read some of the stuff with Moreland, but I read it when he was still pretty new and the comics weren't revealing a lot about him. He's a very fierce villain. I believe at one point he actually popped Spider-Man's eye out in one of the JMS comics. But he is a very powerful villain. A lot of people are saying that they would rank him as far as, how much of a danger he is to Spider-Man. They would rank him in the top 10 Spider-Man villains. So, and I agree with that. That's not a bad assessment. Yeah. But this is going to bring all of the Spider-Men, and women together to face this villain because it's apparently this is a big event. And I think you and I kind of talked before about our problems with events and sometimes having a lot going on. And this looks like it's going to come pretty quickly off the heels of Peter Parker finally getting his body back, which happens at the end of this month. It'll happen at the end of April.
Okay. That was going to be my question. Like, is this going to be before or after that occurred? I couldn't remember when that was supposed to happen. I unfortunately have not been reading Spider-Man. I've gotten behind. I've wanted to, but I've gotten behind reading a lot of comics too, just some real life stuff, but I wasn't sure if that was going to happen before or after, but it just seems like it's one big thing after another.
Right, and I try to keep up, and there actually is, just to prove my point, there is another event supposedly that's going to have, this will be a smaller one, that will happen in between Peter Parker coming back and the Spider-Verse event.
Well, they got to have a summer event.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
This is a topic for another time, but this just feeds into my whole thing about while Marvel is running their giant event, and I actually talked with a friend of mine about this for a little while the other day. It seems like, we're going to have our big event, but the X-Men are also going to have an event. The Spider-Man is also going to have his own event. Everybody else is, Deadpool's got the big wedding event this month, so it's just everybody has their own little stuff. And if you really wanted to keep up with all of it, it's almost impossible. There's just so much money. There's almost no way to do it.
Yeah, that's what really gets me, is it's one of these things like, hey guys, we know you really like this character, but we're going to have these huge events with him crossing over in all these different comics, and we're not going to make it where you could just read his comic and get a story that's part of the event. You're going to have to read all the comics to get the whole story, because otherwise it's just going to be confusion, because you're getting like part 1 of 8 and then part 4 of 8 in his issues.
Right.
Those are the ones I really hate when it happens like that. Like, if you do an event and I can just read what I'm already reading and get like it's part of it, but it's not like I have to read everything to get the whole story, that's okay. Yeah. But
and to add to this, like there's going to be about a 5-page preview that is coming out. I want to say in May, that is going to kind of start the ball rolling for the event. And that 5-page preview is actually going to be in the free comic book day comic for Guardians of the Galaxy. So the good news is it's free, but you need to go find this if you want to get the little teaser for it. Some of the pages from that teaser, I believe, are actually on the link we were given that show the 1602 Spider-Man.
Yeah.
It's written by Dan Slott, who has been doing an amazing job with Spider-Man, from what everyone says.
He's written some pretty good stuff in the past. I remember I really enjoyed his She-Hulk that he wrote.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting because he actually, him and one of the editors that are working on the book, actually said that their story was inspired by the Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions video game. And if you've never seen that one, it's a neat game where there are 4 different Spider-Men from 4 different universes, and they all have to work together to stop an event that's happening in all 4 of their universes. And that was the video game that a lot of people remember the most, because you get to play Spider-Man Noir in that particular game. And I think Spider-Man Noir will be making an appearance, also in the in this comic book event. So that might be cool.
I mean, here's my thing: is it's like there's so many different alternate versions of Spider-Mans from different realities. Does it also include like Spider-Woman from the normal universe?
Yeah, they've announced that she's going to be in there. Now, I don't know if it'll be the Spider-Woman from the 616,
but it will
Jessica
be Drew or whatever her name is.
But it will be a Spider-Woman, and they're really, if you think about it, I bet there's been more Spider-Women than you can actually think of, because there were a ton for a while there.
Well, there was that Arana. She was part of the Spider-Man stuff. And then there's Spider-Girl from the future. And then there's like a Spider-Girl in the present now. Maybe they're the same person.
There was an Earth 2 Spider-Girl. There's the daughter of Peter Parker that's also from Earth 2 that's Spider-Girl. There's, I can't think of the name of... it escapes me. But there are a lot. Let's just put it that way. There's also some people that like I noticed one of the ones in there is just the Spider-Man from Civil War. So I don't even know if that's like a different... Maybe that's a version of Peter Parker where he decided not to get rid of Tony Stark's costume that he made for him after Civil War. You know, or Civil War never happened in that universe. I don't know.
Maybe. It's... You know, but this... Back to the whole event thing. First off, when you got one event that creates this, like, paradigm shift in the universe, this is one of my big gripes with events also, is that it creates this huge shift in the entire universe. And then you do another event and something happens that maybe doesn't go along with the previous event. But a couple events down the line, you undo something that occurred.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that drive me up the wall. So I'm curious to see what this event's eventual outcome will be. And if it's going to be like a long-running, you know, thing that stays that way, or is it eventually just going to shift back to the way it used to be? Like, that's how most Spider-Man events are, if you think about it.
No, that's true.
Like, when was the last time he used his bone spike wrist things he got in one event?
I think, I know what you're talking about.
So that was a Morlun event also, I might add. That's the one where he
so.
went to his cocoon and came out with, like, bone spikes or something ridiculous. And
that's also where he fought the spider spirit thing.
Yes. A Morlun. That's why I said it was Morlun, because it dealt with the beast totems.
It's Spider-Man the Other. That's what it was.
And then, like, right after that was the one where he basically gave up Mary Jane or something to Mephisto, and
that was One More Day. Yeah.
One More Day, and then that was undone.
That kind of had to be undone. That was horrible.
Yeah. But then he did the whole thing with Doc Ock taking over the body, and now that's being undone.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Dan Slott said from the beginning, Peter Parker's going to be back.
Yeah.
I'm amazed they kept it that way as long as they did. I figured the fans would have, you know, a cowl, but they didn't. A lot of people actually kind of liked the whole thing of you having Otto Octavius and you having Parker's spirit kind of being like, no, you know. But
I don't know. It just drives me up the wall with events like that.
Yeah. Here's the thing. Like TV shows, comics have a level of status quo. Now, I think they have a less restrictive level of the status quo, but a lot of times comic book companies want their characters kept in a certain box. They draw a box for them. They're willing to let them go tiptoe outside the box just a little bit, but not much, unless it's like a huge, huge change. And so I think kind of like, you know, where you have your TV show where by the end of the episode or by the end of that story arc, everything kind of needs to be back to zero. So the next person that comes in and writes the story, they know exactly where they're starting from and ending from and all that. And it's an unfortunate problem with comic books. And it's one of the reasons why I don't like comic books that go on for years and years and years. Sometimes that's why it's good to have a comic book and say, hey, we're going to let this comic run for X number of issues, and then we'll either reboot it or we'll do something else.
Well, I think companies like Marvel and DC are a lot more crazy with it, especially with their legacy characters. You know,
right.
It's like, oh, we can do this thing really crazy, but you're going to have to undo it in the end because we don't want you screwing up Spider-Man forever. We don't want you to screw up the X-Men forever or whatever.
Yeah, it's like that great story of Grant Morrison where, you know, he told him he wanted to kill Magneto, and basically, from what I remember, they were kind of like, okay, well, we'll think about it, and he went ahead and did it anyway.
And Magneto showed up alive in a different comic that same month.
Yeah.
Like, the first week, this issue came out where Wolverine kills Magneto. And it's just like, oh my god, that was ridiculous. And it was the end of a great run.
It was an amazing story. Because it was the whole Zorn saga leading up to Days of Tomorrow, or Here Comes Tomorrow. That's what it was leading up to. It was
probably one of the better runs of X-Men in the last, 10 years or so, truthfully, was that run that Morrison did. And then, like, Magneto shows up alive in a crap comic like the end of the month. It was just like, seriously? This guy wasn't even dead for a month.
Because after he did that run, as soon as Grant Morrison went to DC, they undid it and said it was a clone.
Yeah, something stupid.
Well, okay, to be fair, it was done by precedence earlier that Magneto had several clones running around because Joseph was one of them, but it was still crappy. They basically took a really good story and they're like, well, we don't want Magneto to be dead, so here you go.
Yeah, it's like, oh, he's our staple villain for them. Why? No, there are other villains. In fact, Magneto is probably one of the older ones, and he doesn't really get used quite as much as he used to as a villain. Now he's
a pretty much good guy. He's very gray person sometimes, but he's been a good guy forever.
But that. Oh man, I forgot all about that. I'm trying to remember what the bad comic was he showed up in.
I don't know. Here's my thing with
Excalibur, was that it? Was one of the ones where they were like
Probably.
in the wreckage of the Genosha.
Yes. I remember the story you're talking about.
It was bad. Yeah. It was horrible.
Here's my thing though, and I would mind it a lot less if when they did kill somebody, look, we all know he's going to come back. All right, that's fine. Mm-hmm. I think everyone that you kill, you should not be allowed to bring them back for at least a year. There should be a time limit to when you can bring this person back.
Well, have you ever seen, there's a discussion a guy makes about the moment that it became okay for comic characters to come back from the dead was Superman.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a really good discussion. It's a video a guy explains how before Superman, when a character died, he was dead. Now there were exceptions. Things would happen where it's like turned out it was a clone or something simple, but it wasn't common. Usually, if a character's gone, they're gone. Superman basically broke that, and once Superman came back from the dead, then it was okay for everybody to come back from the dead. In fact, characters like Jason Todd who'd been dead for multiple years, it became okay for him to come back.
Yeah, there's a really cool kind of, I don't know if this is the same discussion you're talking about, but think about how with villains, kind of like what you were saying. It was more understandable for the villain to maybe have had the clone or the fake death or whatever because he's a villain. Mm-hmm. But when a good guy died, when somebody like Superman or this upstanding person died, they were gone. They were dead. There's no hidden clones, no trap doors, nothing. They're just dead.
Yep.
And that comic, and I'd heard that before, and I'm pretty sure I know the discussion you're talking about had done it. I think Max Landis is another guy who kind of discusses that.
Yeah.
He has a big rant about Superman, and one of the things he discusses is that whether you like the death and return of Superman or not, it was a huge change. It, like you said earlier, it was a paradigm shift almost for comics.
Yeah, it really basically took it from where death was this final thing that happened to somebody to it was Dragon Ball Z, where it's like, I'll be back, just go get the Dragon Balls, who cares? Death is just a speed bump. It's not really a permanent thing.
And if you have a series like DBZ where death is treated from the get-go as something almost like you said, a speed bump, that's one thing. But in comics, I'll use Colossus as an example. Colossus, at one point, to save all the mutants from the legacy virus or whatever it was, he injects himself with the virus.
Yes.
And he dies because he's patient zero, but everybody else gets to live. That was a great sacrifice. That was an awesome ending for Colossus. He was a cool character, cool way to go out and be the hero, And so when he was brought back in Astonishing X-Men, at first I wasn't 100% behind it, but it had been a long time. And he had really only shown up in like otherworld kind of comics before, between that time. And when they brought him back, I love that Kitty Pryde is just beating on his chest. And it's like, if you're a clone, if you're a shapeshifter, if you're, whatever else she says, I will pretty much kill you, because she knows that universe. She knows what it could be. And I thought they handled that so well that was one time I did not mind seeing this, one of these characters come back. But 9 times out of 10, they're usually not handled that well.
Yeah, that's true. That was a very well-written part of it. Was that? I think it was Warren Ellis's run, too, if I remember correctly.
No, that was Joss Whedon's run. Warren Ellis came. Yeah. He came after, yeah.
Okay, yeah, you're right. That was a really good run.
That was, because Joss Whedon did Runaways. And as much as I love Runaways, I got so tired of waiting for those comics. And so when he started doing Astonishing, I was like,
You're still waiting, in fact, for those comics.
Yeah. And I was like, man, I don't know. And then so Astonishing starts, and I picked it up, and it was probably one of the better X-Men things. Yeah. Though most people remember that for Scott Summers sleeping with Emma Frost and Wolverine jumping up in the window and going, what was the line? It's like, so which stage of grieving is this? And Scott Summers just blasts him out of the window his eye.
I remember that.
I love that.
I think I also remember in that comic was they were fighting some giant monster, and it does a little thought bubble for each character. And Wolverine's fighting, and he's flying through the air or something, and his only thought is beer.
Yeah.
Beer.
Yeah. I think that's all. I'm sorry. I think that's also the one where they run into the Fantastic Four, and the thing goes, so they figured out a cure for that problem you have. And Wolverine goes, what, being a mutant? And the thing goes, no, being Canadian. That's so stupid. All right.
But yeah, so death, which usually that type of stuff happens in events, is one of these things that irritates me in these events where something major happens and they come back. You know, I'm still waiting for the Jean Grey resurrection. I mean, they tried it. They tried several times for her to come back, but I think the readers are just kind of like, God, just keep her dead. I'm so tired of hearing about Jean Grey and the stupid Phoenix.
But you say that, but she's in the comic. They found a way around it. And,
well, that's true.
And I admit, I don't mind that way, because at least it's different. It's not
she's
just
not
another resurrection. Yeah. So I accept it. And I like it that Bendis is focusing on, you know, his whole deal with, okay, well, she's having to adjust not only to her powers and everything that's happening to her, but also now she knows all that crazy stuff that happened to her, and it scares the crap out of her.
Yep.
So, getting back to the Spider-Verse event, the last thing I'll say about this, and I think you'll know exactly where I'm coming from with this. My biggest problem with this event, well, I have two big problems. One, other than it being an event, I think it has a lot of room for kind of cheese, and I hope there's not too much cheese of, I'm Spider-Man, no, you're Spider-Man, and the Spider-Ham says one damn thing, I swear.
There's going to be a lot of,
inside
fan
jokes.
service,
Yes, there's just going to be time. But
a lot of look to the camera and wink moments.
Right,
you know?
That's going to happen. But my other big complaint is, does no one else remember that this is exactly how the 90s cartoon for Spider-Man ended?
I'd forgotten it until you mentioned it. Actually, I was sitting when I saw that you made that comment. I was like, "Oh my god, that is exactly true!" Because that's how that cartoon ended, and yeah, it was a cluster of something.
Yeah,
it was confusing.
I for those who don't know, I really loved the 90s Spider-Man cartoon. I don't think it was as good as the X-Men cartoon or Batman the Animated Series, but it was right up there. It was really good. But the ending is so odd that Spider-Man, you know, who should be this kind of morally good character who's going through a lot of stuff and he's depressing, they bring to fight the threat of, I think it was Carnage and somebody else, they bring all of the Spider-Men from different universes there to fight him in this one bad future.
Yeah.
And it's really cool. They have, like, some characters, like, there's a Spider-Man that's basically like Tony Stark. He built this armor suit. And there's, you know, one who still has the 6 arms. And there's one that I remember that's just the actor. He's not even, doesn't even have powers. He plays Spider-Man on, like, a Broadway musical.
Yeah.
And so, at the end, it's this really cheesy moment where he goes off after they've defeated Carnage, and he meets Stan Lee, who, of course, is his creator. And it's this moment that completely takes you out of the series. It just... And
first off, as a child, confusing as all get out. Like, you don't understand, especially some deep existentialist discussion about the creator speaking to his creation. You don't get that. You're just like, wow, who is this old man Spider-Man's talking to? Why is he talking to Stan Lee?
Oh, man.
Stan Lee's the real man. Spider-Man's not real.
It's not bad, but it definitely, that show deserved a better ending. That show deserved a much better ending for how good the rest of that series is. And that's all of the problems with that show, but yet still how good it is left for another discussion. To wrap this up into the Spider-Verse thing, I
hope
just...
this doesn't end with him speaking with Stan Lee.
Right. I think it's going to, though. Maybe not Stan Lee, but it's going to end with something similar to that. And I see a lot of room for failure. And I have a little bit of faith in Dan Slott as a Spider-Man guy, because after One More Day happened, I feel so bad for him, because he basically had to do Brand New Day, which was good. I don't care what anyone says. Brand New Day was not a bad series. For Spider-Man, it was great. It just had the unfortunate thing that got dropped in his lap, and somebody said, here, this is what we just did. This is what Joe Quesada wants done. deal with this and go from this point. And so I have some faith in Dan Slott, but I don't see this ending well.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't have a lot of faith in it. It'll probably be another one of these like big hyped events that's garbage. Or if something big does come from it, in 6 months another event will undo it.
Yeah, that's the way of, like you said, DC and Marvel Comics. I'm not trying to stand on a soapbox here, but when some people ask me recently, I'm reading a lot more Image, I'm reading a lot more Dark Horse, I'm reading a lot more creator-owned stuff. One of the reasons is because I get tired of having to keep up with 20 different issues of X-Men every month and trying to wade through the BS of what they're doing, what they've undone, the past. I just finished Volume 4 of Lock and Key, and I'm so into that story, and one of the reasons is because I'm reading it all. It's all right in front of me. There's nothing extra I have to pick up. There's no, oh, well, we're going back and kind of undoing this thing we did 200 issues ago. And I'll don't get me wrong. That doesn't mean I don't like Spider-Man and X-Men and Batman. I love those guys.
This one panel in issue 239?
Yeah.
Nope. Well, too bad. This whole storyline's based on that one panel.
It's okay. It's like their summer event is about to be the big thing about who killed the Watcher, right?
Okay.
Well, apparently, in some issue, back in like 2012, early 2012 or late 2011, there was an issue of either Guardians of the Galaxy or one of the other space ones where two people infiltrate the Watcher's citadel unnoticed. Which, if you know anything about the Watcher, that's crazy that anyone could do something with him not noticing. Mm-hmm. Especially breaking into his own home. And so that's what supposedly starts all this. Well, my question is, what if I want to read this event, but I don't want to go? Hopefully they'll recap it. Hopefully there'll be something where they'll go back to it. But like you said, it's cool that they have that foresight, and assuming they didn't just try to link it together, later on.
Yeah.
But sometimes that's just crazy. That's just I don't know. I wish they would keep it a little bit more compartmentalized, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, well, I guess we'll just have to see. Maybe we'll both be wrong.
Yeah, maybe it'll be good.
All right. Well, moving on to the controller side of things. So, we've both played, and we've talked about in the past, BioShock and the studio that made it and how they're closing down. Well, I think, was it last week or the week before? It was the week before last, if I remember correctly. The final DLC for BioShock Infinite came out, and it pretty much tried to tie all the games together, and I think it did a pretty good job. So, if you have not played it, heads up, this is going to be spoiler heavy, because we're going to discuss the entire BioShock universe, because that's what it goes through.
And we really can't discuss this without doing that.
Yeah.
However, do you think it ties in BioShock 2 at all?
Yes.
Okay.
The only reason I say so is because I went, and after I played this, I was like, it's been a long time since I played BioShock and BioShock 2. So I went to the BioShock wiki and read the history of them, and it ties them together by discussing characters that occur or having them show up in some of the verbal stuff.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily have it tied together by events that happened in the thing.
All right, well, that's interesting, because I've never actually beaten BioShock 2. I've played it, but I've never beaten it.
Well, BioShock 2 takes place, 10 years after the first BioShock.
Right, yeah.
So for those who haven't played Burial at Sea, what it is it's the BioShock Infinite DLC, but it takes place in Rapture, which is where BioShock 1 and 2 both were at. And now, Steven, you've played both parts, right? Or have you only played the first one still?
No, I'm done. I'm finished.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, the first part, you're playing as Booker DeWitt once again, the main character from BioShock Infinite. But it's a different Booker, which we saw. There are multiple Bookers because of Elizabeth's ability to do whatever she wants, pretty much, is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Plot device. That's her ability.
Quantum whatever. That's
some kind of quantum entanglement type stuff where she can pull things from any dimension because it exists in some dimension somewhere. But basically, she's come down here because she wants him to help her locate a little girl that's been kidnapped. And over the course of this, you find out that Booker had found this little girl, and he was basically a drunk, and he's the reason she got kidnapped, and she's probably been turned into a little sister and things like that.
Which I would just like to point out for a second. I was like thinking of the Booker DeWitt I know. If he got drunk and apparently lost this girl while gambling, I know he didn't gamble her away. That's not what they were implying.
Yeah.
But he lost her.
I thought they were at first, but yeah, they were.
But I was just thinking, like, the Booker DeWitt I know would just go on a damn tear and just kill everybody until the girl showed back up.
Well, so that's part of it, is that the Booker DeWitt you know, this is not him.
Yes, and I understand that, but I just thought that was a funny moment in that.
So, basically, this whole thing ends and concludes with Booker and Elizabeth finding the little girl, but Booker being killed. Partially from Big Daddy, and another part from Elizabeth.
Right.
She was down here seeking revenge, basically. And from my understanding, is that the Booker DeWitt that you played, he was the actual Booker DeWitt that when he went to go, like, this is so spoiler heavy. I feel sorry for people who are listening who have never played BioShock Infinite, because
you may just want to stop now if you ever plan on playing BioShock Infinite.
Yeah,
because it's good. You should play it.
Yeah, it's amazing. But so this is the Booker DeWitt that when he went to the revival, he didn't get baptized and he left, and he never could really sort his life out. So he instead came down to Rapture to find a whole new life. So,
okay, I'm a little confused there, because in the flashbacks or the memory parts at the end of the first one,
mm-hmm.
I thought that they were saying that this is a Booker DeWitt who was Comstock. He wanted to escape after what all happened, so they sent him to Rapture, and that's why you see him shaving the beard off, because he's going back from Comstock to being Booker DeWitt again.
Maybe so. That's not the way I interpreted it.
Because you see the Luteces saying, hey, we can give you a place to go, and they open up a portal to Rapture.
Yeah, that's true. I forgot about that part.
See, this is how confusing this is.
Yeah, it's a very confusing story. But it's one of those ones that's confusing but good. Like, you really just want to know more. Like I said, I went and read so much afterwards because I was just curious. That does make sense, though. And that also explains why Elizabeth came down here to seek revenge.
Well, yeah, because he basically... We don't know the whole story, but let's assume that this version of Comstock, the baby thing happens, but it goes worse than what it actually did in the game we played.
Well,
so
it did go worse.
Yeah. So he escapes to Rapture to get away from everything. And even though it's an alternate Booker from the Booker we know of, the Booker, I'll just confuse myself. But the point is that she, from the universe that we know, comes to get him, even though he's from an alternate universe. He's an alternate Comstock / Booker. Just revenge. Just a lot of revenge.
Yeah, it's a giant revenge story. So that's the first episode of the DLC.
And let me just say that it felt very rushed. It was fun, but it just didn't live up to BioShock Infinite. It had some interesting things, but it felt like it really was just like, oh, here's a quick, because I think you can beat that one in like 2 hours, they said, if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, I can see that. I think it was like 3 to 4 for me. I did it in less than a night.
Yeah.
But that one, I agree with you. I felt it was pretty rushed. I felt like it didn't really add anything to the overall story of the BioShock universe. And it was just, here you go, play as Booker in Rapture rather than on I can't remember the name of the floating city now. Is it Columbia?
Yes, Columbia.
Yeah, so play him in Rapture rather than Columbia. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't great. Yeah. Now, the second DLC, I think, was really good. And I think that's what I was hoping the first one would have been.
Yeah.
So in the second DLC, though, you actually play as Elizabeth. Because her coming to this place and doing this, she lost her abilities. So she's here, and now that she's here, she's, lost her abilities, so she has to actually start doing the serums and stuff like that so she can gain the different powers.
The plasmids, yeah.
Plasmids, yeah, that's right. I'm trying to remember what they call them, because they call them something different, both of them. But
Vigors for Columbia, Plasmids for Rapture.
That's right. And what this one does, what the second DLC for Buried Alive does, is it ties the entire universe together. It shows how Rapture is linked directly to Columbia, and stuff that's happened there, and stuff that's happened in the other DLCs and things like that.
It not only ties all that together, the very ending also shows you Elizabeth's part, because one of the things that she's questioning throughout the whole event is why she had to come back there.
Yeah.
And it hits you like a ton of bricks at the end.
Yeah.
I guess since we're spoiling it, basically BioShock 1 would have never happened had she not done her part.
Yeah.
And gotten Atlas, whom everybody should at this point know as Fontaine, which, more confusing, but had gotten him the command phrase for the character of Jack, which is who you play in the first one.
Yeah. So she kind of realizes that this was all her fault, and so she tries to go about at least trying to do something good in the end, which is saving the little girl who was turned into a little sister, that she originally was talking with Booker about. So she tries to do some good, but it ends with, her getting Elizabeth dying. So it kind of concludes the whole story and everything's done. So it's like none of this crazy stuff can happen because she's now gone. And that the thing is that the reason she lost her abilities, from my understanding, is because... So let me see if I can remember. The reason she had her abilities to do the whole quantum entanglement is because part of her existed in multiple universes.
Yeah.
So, because her pinky was lost and it was left in one part, and then her body's in the rest of her's in the other part. So because of that, she could do this whole quantum entanglement thing. But by coming to this location, it basically brought them back together in the same place, and getting rid of Booker Comstock, DeWitt, whatever you want to call him, it undid everything. So now she's just a person.
Yeah. Her killing that version of Comstock is what triggered the loss of her tears.
Yeah. But...
Which is really if you think about it, it still sounds like it's all psychological in a way. Does that make sense? It's almost like, I think if she had really tried to work through it, she could have gotten her powers back, but... So,
story aside, I like this...
Which, the story is good. The story is good.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm not going to tell you right now to go get it if you've never played Infinite. But you could play Infinite having never played Rapture or played the first two BioShocks and then play these two DLCs and it would still be good. So you don't necessarily have to go play all the BioShocks, but I liked the gameplay in the second episode. And the reason I liked it was because BioShock is not really I never really felt it was a sneaky game.
It's not. It's very run up and throw your shit.
Yeah, but it showed that it could be a sneaky game, because when you play as Elizabeth, she gets a plasmid where she can actually go invisible or see through walls and stuff,
which is amazing.
Yeah, that I was like, God, I wish they would have done a game like this where I'm a sneaky person trying to sneak around, because it made the game so much. It was a different feel to the whole thing. Like, you're no longer trying to just like, all right, you just need to run up and kill all these guys. It's more like, I need to run around, sneak, and then catch one off guard, take him out, and try to take out other ones, because she just wasn't as good as Booker was.
Right. And when you add in the crossbow that they added in to the DLC, that plasmid plus the crossbow, I never felt more like Sam Fisher in another game than I did right there. Just
BioShock Splinter Cell Edition.
Right. And in the first one, the first part of the DLC, so Burial at Sea Part 1, it's almost like playing a different Booker. Like, I think they did that because they wanted you to know, hey, this is Booker DeWitt, but this is not your Booker DeWitt. Yeah. Because he sneaks around a little bit more. He can't hack, and you have to be a little bit more cautious.
Yeah.
Plus, ammo is seemingly a lot more scarce. Like they're encouraging. Yeah, they're encouraging you to sneak up behind people and take them out quietly.
Especially in the second DLC, it was very scarce. I mean, near the end, you have plenty, but in the beginning, you're like, okay, I've got one bolt. Hopefully, I can pull it out of this guy after I take him out.
Yeah, I was scarce on ammo a lot of the way. The only thing that I wasn't scarce on is I kept every one of those mass gas arrows that I could get my hands on. The other thing is, I think a lot of people forgot that you can actually buy the ammunition, the arrows, because I saw a lot of comments where people are like, "Oh yeah, I should go buy some more arrows."
Yeah, that's how I got most of mine.
Yeah. I will say this too. I've never used plasmid traps in all of the BioShock games, because with the plasmids, you can hold down the trigger and make a trap of it. I have never used those traps more than I did in Burial at Sea Part 2.
I agree.
Especially, there's one point where they tell you to do it.
Yeah, they're like, hey, there's about to be a lot of guys coming in this room. You should probably trap it.
Yeah. But even before that, just because of the change, like stealth version, I had started the possession traps. I use those possession traps a lot. But like I said, that little piece of DLC, I use traps more than I did in any other playthrough of BioShock ever.
Yeah. And I mean, there's some other things that game-wise that they changed, like, Elizabeth was the one who could always pick locks in Infinite. But now you're playing Elizabeth, so they had to create this lock-picking minigame, which was not
horrible.
Really? I disagree. I felt it was simple.
It was more like dumb luck in some of the cases, especially where you have 7 pins and 6 of them are red and 1 is blue. I don't know. I didn't like it. I did not like the lock picking.
I thought it was a pretty good little thing. I didn't think it was that bad.
Did you ever
It's
play
all pattern recognition.
Did you ever play any of the Splinter Cell games?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Their
lock picking. Yeah, their lock picking systems are much better.
Yeah. Of all the games with lock picking systems, that's probably one of the ones that I've hated the least.
Yeah.
Like, the Skyrim one's not terrible, but it's
not horrible.
Super finicky.
Yeah.
So, and the lack of lockpicks you have makes it even worse for that one.
Right. I'm sorry. I did not like the lockpicks. It was probably the only added mechanic that I just straight up I did not like. Everything else they added, I pretty much enjoyed.
I thought it was all right. But I'll say this about the DLC there. I think it was a good way to conclude the universe. Well, they're not concluding, because thing is, the property's still lying. Somebody else will still do it. But it's a good way for that studio to conclude their work on it. They're like, this was our stories. If somebody else wants to use a BioShock name, they can. But this is our stories. We've done all of these. This is how it concludes. This ties them all together so you can see it's one giant thing. Because what you find out is that the reason that they had plasmids was because... Wait, no. The reason they have vigors is because they created a link between the two worlds, and they basically traded technologies. And so...
And that's actually why Suchong wanted a more replenishable source, because what Columbia was doing is they were having to go farming for these sea slugs, and that was how they were getting the power for their vigors. But Suchong used his research, Fink's research, to create the Little Sisters. Yeah. And there's a big thing about imprinting and all that, and it's good. It's really well done.
Yeah, the imprinting, they also explains why the Songbird... Basically, Rapture was working on imprinting because of Little Sisters and the Big Daddies, and they then used that knowledge to imprint Songbird onto Elizabeth in the Infinite Universe.
So here's my question. Songbird ended up being a dude in a suit, right? Because one of the Songbird things that you find is a guy in a suit. It's the schematic.
I don't really know.
See, okay, this is where it gets kind of confusing to me. It looks like there is an actual Songbird, like a straight-up creature or mechanical beast or something. But one of the last ones you find is a dude in a suit. And we know the Big Daddies are dudes in suits.
There probably was a guy in the suit.
Yeah.
Who'd been best up to do that.
Yeah.
In the DLC also you get to see Suchong, his death.
Yeah, which is great. This is an amazing part.
I want to say, is that actually something that happens in BioShock 2?
Maybe. No, wait, it can't. If BioShock 2 is 10 years after Rapture...
Yeah, no, that's right.
In BioShock 1, when you get to Rapture, he has just recently died.
Yeah. Okay.
Now maybe
I think that guy who playing BioShock 2 might be the one that wakes up and kills Suchong, if I remember correctly, in the past.
Oh, I think you might be right.
Because remember, they thought he was killed, but he came back and they used the Vita tanks to bring him back. I think that's who that was.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right.
Yep.
Oh, well. I need to actually...
Everybody out there's like, what are they talking about?
I need to actually finish BioShock 2. I love the series. BioShock 2 to me is the weakest of the series, and I didn't enjoy what I'd played enough to finish it. But maybe I'll do that. I'll put it on the list.
Yep. But so the DLC for BioShock Infinite's out. If you played Infinite and you liked it, get both the DLC. I think it's only $20 for both of them.
If you get the season pass, it's $20 for both, or I think it's $15 a piece or whatever.
Yeah, it's worth it.
But I'll say this. I think they made a really awesome decision by letting you play Elizabeth, not just for the story aspect, but I think they made a really good decision to, one, make the person who was probably the most powerful character in Infinite, they made her vulnerable, and they made her where you couldn't just run in. Because if you notice, her life bar and her shield is so much less than Booker's.
Does she even have a shield?
I don't think she did. You're right. I don't think she did. Excuse me.
Because that's a plasmid.
Yeah.
That gives you the shield.
Yeah. Sorry. So she didn't even have the shield. She just Oh, that's right. She had the med kits. She had where you could expend the med kits. Okay.
Yeah.
But they make her weaker. But also, it does a lot for the character. The opening for her in episode 2 is this almost Disney-esque beginning that quickly turns into a nightmare, and you really kind of get into the character a lot more in this DLC, even more so than you did in Infinite. And seeing the comparison of how Elizabeth has changed from Infinite to this DLC, the voice actress did a great job of making her feel much more determined. Mm-hmm. She's a little bit more vicious. There's a whole point in there about her being able to kill and how certain people sacrifice themselves so she could be able to kill. It was. I really liked it. I think it was a great choice.
He still shows up in the second DLC in one form or another.
I wasn't going to say exactly how that happens, but just because I think that Troy Baker is such a good voice actor, they were like, wait, is it Troy Baker? I think it's Troy Baker. Just because the guy was such a good voice actor, I think they were like, well, we need to find a way for him to still be a part of this, and they did it masterfully. It was well done.
Yeah, I agree. So
overall, overall, if you want to start from the beginning, play BioShock. If you want to play BioShock 2, that's cool. But at least play in BioShock Infinite, and I would recommend the DLC.
Agreed, 100%. So I think that's going to wrap it up for this episode then.
I think so.
Alright, so if you have any questions or any comments you want to send to us about things, you can email us at comicsandcontrollers@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter at ZombieJesus here. And where can they follow you at, Steven?
On Twitter as well, at Steven Wilds.
Alright, there you go. So until next time, I'm Kyle.
And I'm Steven.
You guys have a good one.